Chosen one, listen carefully. What I'm about to share is not easy to hear, but it is necessary. This message is urgent and intended only for those who truly walk with God. If someone is not aligned, if they are only curious or entertained by spiritual words, they will feel resistance and leave. And that is exactly how it should be. This message is for the chosen, and the chosen will recognize it. God is speaking now because something must be corrected. Not your faith, not your calling, but our understanding. And I say this with humility and clarity. We were wrong about some things. Not wrong in believing God, but wrong in how we interpreted what He was doing. And God is correcting us now, not to shame us, but to free us. If this message has reached you, it is at the perfect moment, not late, not early, right now. Because what you believe in this season will shape how you move forward. And if you don't hear this correction, you may continue carrying pressure God never intended you to bear. Chosen one, God says you must hear this now. Not tomorrow, not later, now. Because clarity is replacing confusion, and truth is settling where assumptions once lived. Stay with me until the end, because what you are about to understand will lift the weight off your mind and restore peace to your spirit. Before we continue, chosen ones, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the Spirit Guide channel if you haven't already, share this message with other chosen ones, and comment 444 in the comments as a sign that you are ready for divine correction, realignment, and truth from God.
When God corrects, it's not condemnation. Chosen one, I want you to breathe as we enter this part, because correction often triggers fear in people who genuinely love God. And that fear does not come from God. It comes from misunderstanding His heart. When God corrects, He is not condemning you. Condemnation pushes you away. Correction draws you closer. Condemnation shames. Correction clarifies. Condemnation says you failed. Correction says you're ready for more truth. Many chosen ones struggle here because you care deeply about getting things right. You don't want to misrepresent God. You don't want to miss Him. So when you hear the words, "we were wrong," your mind may tense up. You may wonder, did I fail spiritually? Did I misunderstand God? Did I mess something up? Let me answer you clearly. No, you did not fail. You were growing. Correction is not a sign that you've gone off the path. It's a sign that you're far enough along the path for deeper instruction. God does not correct people who are not listening. He does not refine those who are not committed. He corrects those He trusts. Think about this. If a teacher never corrects a student, it's not kindness. It's neglect. Correction only comes when growth is possible. Many people confuse correction with rejection because of how correction was delivered to them in the past. Maybe you were corrected harshly, publicly, without compassion. So your nervous system learned to associate correction with danger. But God is not like that. His correction is firm, yes, but it is gentle at the same time. God does not say, "You were wrong, so I'm done with you." He says, "You were seeing part of it. Now let me show you more." There is a big difference. Condemnation attacks your identity. Correction protects it. Condemnation says, "You should have known better." Correction says, "You couldn't have known yet." And that distinction matters deeply for your peace. Chosen one, spiritual growth always involves moments of reorientation. Moments where God says, "What worked before won't carry you forward." That doesn't make the previous season invalid. It makes it complete. You were not wrong to trust God the way you did. You were not foolish for believing what you believed. You were operating with the understanding you had at that level. And now God is expanding that understanding. Expansion requires adjustment. This is why correction often feels uncomfortable. It challenges familiarity. It asks you to loosen your grip on interpretations that once brought comfort. But discomfort does not mean danger. It means movement. Let me say something that may surprise you. God is not disappointed when you misunderstand Him while sincerely seeking Him. He expects it. That's why He guides gently. That's why revelation comes in layers. If God revealed everything at once, it would overwhelm you. Truth unfolds as capacity grows. You are not being corrected because you sinned. You are being corrected because you matured. Some of you felt tension recently, a sense that something wasn't adding up anymore. Teachings that once energized you began to feel heavy. Expectations that once felt motivating started to feel pressuring. That was not rebellion. That was discernment awakening. God was preparing you for correction before you even knew you needed it. And let me address this clearly, because it matters. Correction does not erase your prayers. It does not cancel God's promises. It does not delay your calling. It refines the way those things manifest. When God corrects direction, He does not cancel destination. Some of you have been afraid that being wrong spiritually means you missed something permanently. That fear is not from God. God does not set traps for His chosen ones. He does not hide truth to punish you for not finding it fast enough. He reveals truth when it can be received without harm. Correction also removes unnecessary pressure. Many of you have been carrying weight God never placed on you. Pressure to interpret every delay as a test. Pressure to constantly prepare for something dramatic. Pressure to always be alert, always braced, always waiting for impact. God is correcting that now. You are not meant to live in constant spiritual tension. Awareness does not require anxiety. Readiness does not require exhaustion. And that's why this correction is coming with peace, not fear. If you feel relief listening to this, that's confirmation. Truth brings peace, even when it challenges us. Condemnation brings heaviness. Correction brings clarity. Chosen one, God is not correcting you because you fell short. He is correcting you because He wants you to walk lighter, clearer, and steadier into what's next. Correction is a sign of intimacy. God corrects in private when possible. He does not embarrass His chosen ones. He aligns them. Think about how often Jesus corrected His closest followers, not to push them away, but to prepare them for what they would carry. Correction is preparation. So release the fear that says, "I got it wrong, so I'm in trouble." Replace it with truth that says, "I'm being guided deeper." You are not being scolded. You are being instructed. And as we continue, I'm going to help you understand what exactly we misunderstood, why it felt confusing, and how this correction changes everything going forward. Stay open. Stay calm. You are safe in God's correction. What we thought God was doing, and why it felt confusing. Chosen one, let's speak honestly now, without fear and without pretending. Many of us believed we clearly understood what God was doing in this season. We thought we could see the pattern. We thought we knew what the waiting meant. And at the time, that understanding made sense. It wasn't foolish. It wasn't careless. It was logical based on what we had experienced before. But over time, something started to feel off. What once brought excitement slowly turned into pressure. What once felt like anticipation began to feel like strain. Many of you stayed faithful, but quietly confused. You kept telling yourself, just a little longer, yet the weight kept increasing instead of lifting. That confusion didn't come from a lack of faith. It came from expectation meeting reality. We believed God was preparing us for something that was about to happen externally. A moment, a breakthrough, a sudden shift. We thought the waiting was simply the countdown before release. And so we stayed alert. We stayed ready. We stayed braced. But living in a constant state of anticipation does something to the nervous system. It keeps you tense. It keeps you scanning. It keeps you from fully resting. Over time, what was meant to encourage you began to exhaust you. And that's where the confusion set in. You may have noticed yourself asking questions like, why does it feel heavier instead of lighter? Or, why am I more tired now than I was before? Those questions were not doubts, they were signals. Another part of the confusion came from comparing seasons. In the past, God moved in ways that were more visible, clear endings, clear beginnings. But this time, things felt slower, quieter, less dramatic. And because the pattern was different, it felt unfamiliar. We tried to interpret this season using old frameworks. We assumed urgency meant something was about to break open. We assumed discomfort meant pressure before release. And while that can be true sometimes, it is not always true. God does not repeat himself mechanically. Some of you felt like you were always on the verge of something, yet nothing fully arrived. That almost there feeling lingered for too long. And when it does, it creates internal conflict. You start questioning your discernment. You wonder if you misheard God. You wonder if you misunderstood the signs. That's where confusion deepened. We also believed that if we stayed faithful enough, patient enough, ready enough, the external shift would come faster. So we tried harder. We prayed more. We analyzed signs. We interpreted every delay as a lesson to endure. But endurance was not what God was emphasizing in this season. This is important. God was not asking you to hold your breath. He was asking you to breathe. Another source of confusion was silence. God didn't explain everything immediately. He didn't correct our assumptions right away. And silence can be misinterpreted. We assumed silence meant agreement, or we assumed silence meant testing. In reality, silence often means incubation. God allows certain beliefs to sit for a while because they help us survive a phase. But what helps you survive does not always help you advance. And when survival frameworks are no longer sufficient, they start to feel heavy. That heaviness was not a sign you were off track. It was a sign the season was changing. We also misunderstood waiting as constant readiness. We thought waiting meant always watching, always preparing, always adjusting. But waiting in God often looks like settling, not striving, trusting, not bracing, because we misunderstood that many of you lived in a state of emotional alertness that God never asked for. And over time, that created mental fatigue. You may have felt guilty for feeling tired. You may have questioned why you weren't more excited. But exhaustion does not mean disobedience. Sometimes it means misinterpretation. And God, in His mercy, allowed that confusion to surface instead of ignoring it. Because confusion, when faced honestly, leads to clarity. We thought God was holding something back. In reality, He was holding you steady. We thought the delay meant preparation for action. In reality, it meant preparation for understanding. We thought urgency meant movement was imminent. In reality, urgency meant correction was needed. And here is the key point. God did not allow confusion to punish you. He allowed it to mature you, to show you where your expectations had outgrown your understanding. Confusion is uncomfortable, but it is often the doorway to deeper truth. So if you felt unsettled, disappointed, or quietly tired of waiting, hear this. That feeling was not failure. It was your spirit recognizing that the framework needed to change. In the next part, I'm going to name the assumption that needed correction, not to shame you, but to release you from unnecessary pressure you've been carrying. Stay with me. What comes next will bring relief. The assumption that needed correction. Chosen one, now we come to the heart of this message. This is where clarity replaces strain. This is where weight begins to lift. And I want you to hear this without defensiveness, self-judgment, or fear. The assumption that needed correction was this. We believed that urgency always meant an external breakthrough was about to happen. We assumed that heightened awareness, pressure, and spiritual sensitivity meant we were standing on the verge of a visible release. We thought the intensity we felt was proof that something big was about to arrive on the outside. So we stayed alert. We stayed ready. We stayed braced. But here is the truth. God is correcting now. Urgency does not always mean manifestation. Sometimes urgency means realignment. We assumed that discomfort meant almost there. But in this season, discomfort meant something needs to be understood differently. That assumption was not foolish. It was reasonable based on past experiences. God has moved that way before, but God does not repeat methods just because we're familiar with them. He adapts his approach to our maturity. Another part of the assumption was this. We believed that waiting meant enduring pressure until relief arrived. So we tolerated stress, emotional tension, and mental exhaustion as if they were signs of faithfulness. We spiritualized strain. But God never asked you to live in constant strain. You confused readiness with restlessness. You thought being chosen meant being perpetually on edge, always watchful, always preparing, always scanning for signs. God is correcting that now. Chosen one, spiritual readiness does not feel frantic. It feels grounded. It feels steady. It feels calm even when things are unresolved. Another assumption that needed correction was believing that silence meant we were being tested, that if God wasn't explaining himself, we must be doing something wrong or being evaluated. So we tried harder. We prayed more intensely. We analyzed more deeply. But silence was not testing you. Silence was protecting you from overload. God was not withholding clarity to see how long you could last. He was allowing your capacity to grow so that clarity wouldn't overwhelm you when it came. We also assumed that the pressure increasing meant the blessing was closer. That idea kept you pushing when God was actually asking you to settle. It kept you holding your breath when God was asking you to exhale. And holding your breath for too long creates fatigue, not faith. Here is another assumption that needs gentle correction. We believed that being chosen meant carrying more emotional weight than others, that suffering silently was part of the assignment. That peace would come later, after the mission was complete. But God does not delay peace as a reward. Peace is a requirement for discernment. God does not want you exhausted when you step into what He has prepared. He wants you clear, grounded, whole. Another assumption was believing that clarity would arrive suddenly, all at once, and fix everything. So when clarity didn't come that way, frustration grew. But clarity from God is often progressive. It unfolds as you release old frameworks. You were waiting for an answer when God was offering adjustment. You were watching for a sign when God was inviting you into understanding. And here is perhaps the most important correction of all. We assumed that if we relaxed, we might miss something. That if we stopped watching so closely, we would fall behind. That if we rested, we would be unprepared. That belief kept you tense. But God is not fragile. His plans do not require your constant vigilance to succeed. You cannot miss what is meant for you by resting. You cannot fall behind by trusting God's pace. Read that again internally. You cannot miss what is meant for you by resting. God is correcting the belief that urgency equals danger. In this season, urgency equals awareness. It is not calling you to hurry. It is calling you to realign your understanding. You were not supposed to be living in almost there mode for this long. That state is exhausting because it was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to get your attention, not become your posture. So God is shifting you out of anticipation and into grounding, out of pressure and into peace, out of striving and into clarity. This correction is not saying you misunderstood God completely. It is saying you misunderstood the purpose of the season. You thought it was about arrival. It was about adjustment. And once that assumption is corrected, everything changes. The waiting becomes lighter. The silence becomes less threatening. The urgency becomes calm focus instead of tension. God is not disappointed in you for making that assumption. He allowed it because it served a purpose for a time. But now, that purpose is complete. And here is the relief I want you to feel right now. You are not behind. You are not stuck. You are not missing anything. You are simply stepping into a clearer understanding of what God has been doing all along. In the next part, I will explain why God allowed you to believe this assumption for a while, and how it actually helped prepare you rather than harm you. Stay with me. The correction is almost complete, and peace is already settling in. Why God allowed you to believe it for a while. Chosen one, this is where many people misunderstand God's heart. So I want you to listen slowly and without suspicion. God did not allow you to believe something incomplete because He wanted to mislead you. He allowed it because it served a purpose for that season of your growth. God does not waste seasons. He uses them. Partial understanding is not deception. It is development. When you were first walking through this season, you needed motivation more than explanation. You needed hope more than detail. If God had corrected the assumption too early, it would have taken away the strength you needed to keep going at that time. What you believed then helped you endure. And endurance was necessary for who you were becoming. God often allows His children to believe what their current capacity can hold. He does not overwhelm the mind or the heart. Revelation is measured. Truth unfolds as strength increases. Think about how children learn. They are taught in stages, not because the teacher lies, but because the child cannot yet process the full picture. In the same way, God teaches in layers. What was true at one level becomes incomplete at the next. God allowed you to believe urgency meant arrival because that belief kept you attentive, prayerful, and connected during a critical phase. It kept you from drifting. It kept you engaged. It kept your faith alive during a time when clarity was still forming. But now, that belief has done its job. Another reason God allowed it is because belief reveals attachment. As long as you thought something was about to happen externally, it revealed how much you depended on outcomes for peace. That awareness was important. You needed to see where your peace was anchored. God does not expose attachments to shame you. He exposes them to free you. You also needed to experience the fatigue that came from carrying assumptions too long. Not to hurt you, but to teach you discernment. Some lessons cannot be taught through explanation alone. They must be felt. That tiredness you felt was information. It taught you that living in constant anticipation is not sustainable. It showed you that faith rooted in tension will eventually collapse. God allowed you to feel that so you would never return to it. Another reason God allowed this belief is because it strengthened your discernment. You learn to notice when something feels spiritually heavy, even if it sounds spiritually correct. You learn to listen to your inner state, not just external messages. That discernment will protect you in the future. God also allowed it because it built compassion. You now understand how easy it is to misinterpret spiritual seasons. That understanding will make you gentler with others and with yourself. You won't rush people. You won't pressure them. You won't demand instant clarity. That gentleness is a mark of maturity. There is something else important here. God allowed you to believe this assumption because He knew it would not destroy you. He knows your resilience. He knows your heart. He knows when correction will refine instead of break. God corrects only when the foundation is strong enough to handle it. Some of you have wondered why God didn't step in sooner and clarify things. The answer is simple. You weren't ready yet. Not because you were weak, but because you were still building internal stability. Correction too early can create fear. Correction at the right time creates peace. God waited until your identity was rooted enough that correction would not feel like rejection. Another reason God allowed this belief is because it exposed performance-based faith. Many chosen ones unknowingly tie their worth to spiritual productivity. The belief that something was about to happen made you strive. It made you watch yourself closely. It made you measure your faith constantly. God allowed that so He could release you from it. You are learning that your worth is not proven by vigilance, strain, or endurance. Your worth is inherent. You are chosen before you perform. That is a lesson that must be lived, not just taught. God also allowed you to believe this because it prepared you for deeper trust. Trust that does not depend on signs. Trust that does not demand timelines. Trust that does not collapse when expectations shift. You are now learning to trust God for who He is, not just for what you expect Him to do next. And finally, God allowed you to believe it for a while because it led you here, to this moment of clarity, to this realignment, to this release. Nothing about your journey has been wasted, not the anticipation, not the waiting, not the confusion. Every part of it shaped you. You are not being corrected because you were careless. You are being corrected because you are ready to carry truth without fear. In the next part, I will speak plainly about what God is saying clearly now, and how this new understanding brings freedom instead of pressure. Stay with me. The heaviest part is behind you. What God is saying clearly now. Chosen one, now we arrive at the point where confusion gives way to clarity. This is not new truth in the sense that God suddenly changed his mind. This is clarified truth. Truth that could not be received earlier without creating fear, pressure, or misunderstanding. And now, God is speaking plainly. What God is saying clearly now is this. This season was never about waiting for an external event. It was about stabilizing your inner world. You were not standing on the edge of a moment. You were standing in the middle of a maturation. God is saying that the urgency you felt was not a countdown. It was a call to awareness. A call to notice what was forming within you. A call to shift how you relate to Him, to yourself, and to the process. Here is the clarity that brings relief. You were not supposed to live in constant readiness. You were supposed to learn how to live in alignment. Alignment is calm. Alignment is steady. Alignment does not rush or panic. Alignment does not constantly scan the horizon. It rests in trust. God is saying clearly now that He is not measuring your faith by how alert you are, how much pressure you can tolerate, or how long you can endure discomfort. He is measuring your faith by your ability to remain grounded when answers are incomplete. That is a higher level of faith. God is also saying that peace is not something you earn after obedience. Peace is something He expects you to carry while obeying. If your spirituality consistently costs you your peace, something needs adjustment. This does not mean there will never be challenges. It means challenges are not meant to destabilize you. Another thing God is making clear now is this. You do not need to anticipate His moves in order to cooperate with them. You were trying to stay one step ahead spiritually, thinking that vigilance equaled faithfulness. But God is not asking you to predict Him. He is asking you to trust Him. Trust does not ask, "What's next?" Trust says, "I am held, even if I don't know." God is also clarifying that this season was not a test of endurance. It was a recalibration of perspective. He was teaching you how to carry awareness without anxiety, expectation without pressure, and hope without strain. That lesson changes everything going forward. Here is another thing God is saying clearly now. Rest is not retreat. Some of you felt guilty when your energy dropped. You thought you were losing momentum or falling out of alignment. But God says your need for rest was not weakness. It was wisdom surfacing. Your nervous system needed regulation. Your mind needed quiet. Your spirit needed space. God does not need you tense to work through you. He is also saying clearly now that you are not missing opportunities by slowing down. You are actually avoiding misalignment. Speed without clarity creates regret. God slowed you to protect your future decisions. Let me say this plainly. God is more concerned with how you arrive than how fast you arrive. Another important clarity God is offering now is this. You are allowed to feel peace even when things are unresolved. This is difficult for many chosen ones because you were taught that peace comes after answers. But God is teaching you that peace can exist alongside uncertainty. That is spiritual maturity. You no longer need to interpret silence as absence. Silence is space. Space for integration, space for growth, space for recalibration. God is also saying that He is not withholding anything from you out of delay or punishment. What is meant for you will come when your inner foundation can support it without collapse. He is not slow, He is precise. Another clear message from God now is about identity. You are not chosen because you can carry pressure. You are chosen because you can carry truth. Pressure was never the assignment. Clarity was. God is releasing you from the belief that being chosen means being burdened. Chosen ones are not meant to live heavy lives. They are meant to live anchored lives. Anchored people move through storms without being uprooted. God is also correcting how you interpret urgency. Urgency is not fear-based, it is focus-based. It does not shout, it gently insists. The urgency of this message is not about danger, it is about alignment. God is saying, understand this now so you don't carry unnecessary weight into the next season. Because what comes next requires steadiness, not strain. Another thing God is saying clearly now is this: you do not need to prepare for loss, you need to prepare for stewardship. Many of you subconsciously braced for disappointment. You thought guarding your heart meant expecting less. But God is teaching you that guarding your heart means trusting Him with outcomes. Expecting disappointment is not protection, it is anticipation of pain. God is inviting you into open-handed trust. He is also saying clearly that obedience in this season looks quieter than before. It looks like discernment. It looks like restraint. It looks like choosing peace over proving. This is not a season of explaining yourself. It is a season of embodying truth. You may notice that you feel less compelled to convince others, to interpret everything, to announce what you sense. That is intentional. God is strengthening your inner authority so you no longer rely on external affirmation. Another clear message God is giving now is this: you are allowed to change your understanding without changing your faith. Growth requires revision. Maturity allows correction without identity collapse. God is not threatened by your evolving understanding. He guides it. This correction is not closing a door. It is opening a wider one. And finally, God is saying clearly now that you are safe to settle, safe to exhale, safe to stop bracing. Nothing is about to fall apart because you relaxed. Nothing is slipping away because you trusted. The correction was not meant to alarm you. It was meant to free you. You are not behind. You are not off course. You are not late. You are aligned. And because of this alignment, the next season will not require you to strain the way the last one did. You will move forward with clarity instead of confusion, with steadiness instead of tension. In the next part, I will explain what this correction changes going forward and how it reshapes the way you walk with God from here on. Stay with me. The foundation has been reset, and what's built on it will be lighter and stronger. What this correction changes going forward. Chosen one, once a correction settles, it quietly reshapes everything. Not dramatically, not all at once, but deeply. This correction changes how you move, how you interpret seasons, and how you relate to God and yourself going forward. First, it changes your posture. You are no longer bracing for impact. You are no longer holding your breath waiting for the next sign. You begin to stand in your life instead of leaning forward anxiously. That shift alone brings relief to your body and clarity to your mind. You stop asking, "What am I about to face?" and you start asking, "How do I stay aligned?" That is a powerful change. This correction also changes how you experience waiting. Waiting no longer feels like suspense. It feels like integration. You understand now that God is not delaying to test you. He is pacing to protect you. So waiting becomes gentler, more spacious, less heavy. You will notice that your thoughts slow down. The constant mental scanning fades. You don't feel the same urgency to interpret every emotion or moment spiritually. You allow life to unfold without analyzing it constantly. That does not make you less spiritual. It makes you more grounded. Another major change is emotional freedom. When the pressure to be ready dissolves, your emotions settle. You feel less guilt for resting, less anxiety about missing something, less frustration with yourself for not feeling excited all the time. You stop judging your inner state. This correction also strengthens discernment. You become more sensitive to what is truly from God and what is generated by expectation or fear. You no longer confuse intensity with importance. Calm guidance becomes easier to recognize. Going forward, when something is truly aligned, it will feel clear, not chaotic. It will feel steady, not rushed. Your relationship with God also deepens in a quieter way. Prayer becomes less about asking for updates and more about connection. You stop negotiating with God internally. You stop trying to manage outcomes through spiritual effort. Trust becomes your default posture. Another change is how you relate to people. You stop explaining your process. You stop seeking validation for where you are. You become comfortable with being misunderstood because you are no longer confused about yourself. That inner certainty is a gift of correction. This correction also changes how you handle future seasons of urgency. When urgency arises again, you won't panic. You will pause. You will ask, is this calling me to act or to realign? That discernment will protect you from unnecessary exhaustion. You will no longer spiritualize strain. There is also a long-term change happening in your identity. You no longer see yourself as someone who must carry heaviness to be faithful. You understand now that faithfulness includes joy, peace, and rest. That understanding frees you. Going forward, you will notice that obedience feels lighter, not easier, but lighter. You will move when God says move, and you will rest when He says rest. You will not force motion in silence. This correction teaches you patience without passivity and action without anxiety. You will also be less reactive. When things don't unfold as expected, you won't immediately assume you misunderstood God. You will remain calm, trusting that understanding unfolds over time. That emotional steadiness will change how you experience challenges. Perhaps one of the most important changes is this. You stop measuring progress by external signs and start measuring it by internal alignment. Peace becomes your indicator. Clarity becomes your compass, and that keeps you from chasing illusions. This correction also restores joy. Not excitement driven by anticipation, but quiet joy rooted in trust. You enjoy the present more. You stop postponing peace until something happens. You allow yourself to live now. As you move forward, you will also notice that God's guidance feels less urgent and more steady, less loud and more consistent. That's because your inner environment is calmer. Guidance is easier to hear in stillness. This correction does not reduce your calling. It stabilizes it. You are now positioned to receive without clinging, to succeed without striving, and to grow without losing yourself. And that is what this correction was always meant to do. In the final part, I want to speak directly to your heart one last time, to seal this correction with reassurance and peace. Stay with me. The ending will ground everything we've covered. Correction is proof of calling. Chosen one, let this truth rest gently in your spirit as we come to the end. Correction is not a sign that you missed God. It is a sign that God is close. He corrects what He values. He refines what He intends to use, and He realigns those He trusts with deeper truth. You were never wrong for believing. You were never misguided for hoping. You were growing. And growth always includes moments where understanding matures and perspectives are refined. That does not weaken your faith. It strengthens it. It anchors it. It makes it sustainable. This correction was not meant to unsettle you or make you doubt yourself. It was meant to lift the weight off your mind and restore peace to your spirit. It was meant to free you from the pressure you were never meant to carry and to remind you that God's guidance is calm, steady, and intentional. As you move forward, do so without haste. You do not need to rush. You do not need to prove anything. What God has prepared for you will unfold in His timing, in His way, without requiring you to sacrifice your peace along the way. Walk forward, grounded. Let clarity guide you instead of urgency. Let trust replace tension. And let peace be your confirmation that you are aligned. If this message brought relief, understanding, or quiet confirmation to your heart, take a moment now to like this video, subscribe to the Spirit Guide channel if you haven't already, and share this message with other chosen ones who may be carrying unnecessary pressure. And comment 444 in the comments as a sign that you are aligned with divine correction, truth, and realignment. Remember this, chosen one. Correction is not rejection. It is proof of calling. You are still chosen. You are still guided. And now you move forward clearer, lighter, and steadier than before.